Good afternoon everyone, and welcome to this joint CTBTO UNODA panel on leveraging advances in science and technology for multilateral verification purposes, possibilities, and challenges. My name is Fanny Tonos Paniagua. I am a senior international consultant advising on matters related to disarmament and non-proliferation, and it is a pleasure for me to be moderating this discussion today. Before introducing our panelists, allow me to say a few words about the topic and the objective of our discussion today. During this week, we have had the opportunity to appreciate that the CTBT monitoring and verification regime is a groundbreaking technological undertaking. The regime, particularly through its main components, the international monitoring system and the on-site inspection regime, is there to provide confidence about the compliance with treaty obligations. As of today, the IMS is almost completed, and the readiness of on-site inspections have been demonstrated. This conference has impressively shown that technological advances provide opportunities to increase the effectiveness of the CTBT monitoring and verification tools, while also promoting civil and scientific applications. Now, the CTBT framework exists in the broader context of international efforts for maintaining international peace and security, for addressing nuclear, radiological, biological, and chemical risks, and for preventing the threat of weapons of mass destruction. This panel, placed at the end of the conference and jointly organized with the United Nations Office for Disarmament Affairs, seeks to bring us to that broader framework, so to take us beyond the CTBT context and expand the horizon of our discussions. What mechanisms are in place in the CTBT framework and in other regimes for monitoring advances in science and technology? How have these mechanisms served to drive policy making? How may they in the future serve to drive policy making? How may the CTBT verification regime benefit from the experiences of other regimes, and how may these other regimes benefit from the CTBT experience? What is the role of civil society, industry, and the scientific community in all these processes? These are some of the key issues that this panel seeks to address. In order to do that, we are very pleased to have with us today 4 distinguished panelists, which have a wide area of expertise in the various regimes, notably the regimes envisaged under the CTBT, the Chemical Weapons Convention, and the Biological Weapons Convention. So our panelists in alphabetical order are Ms. Mayra Ameneiros, Ms. Michelle Robillard, Mr. Peter Hotchkiss, and Mr. Oleg Roshkov. I will say now a few introductory words about the panelists. Ms. Mayra Ameneiros is a research associate at King's College London Centre for Science and Security Studies. She is a member of the Technical Advisory Group on Health Security Interface at the World Health Organization. She is also the Deputy Coordinator at the Next Generation Global Health Security Network, where she serves as liaison of the Steering Committee to the Global Health Security Agenda Consortium. She also serves as liaison for the Biological Weapons Convention NGO Working Group. Ms. Michelle Robillard has been involved with CTBTO activities since 1998, when she was first introduced to the South African IMS stations. Michelle has been actively involved in ground-through events for CTBTO monitoring, as well as in-country research. Over the years, she has interacted with the 3 pillars of the CTBTO on various levels, including hosting a number of CTBTO events within South Africa. She is now the co-task leader for the technology refreshment and support to provisional operations tasks within Working Group B, where the outcomes of the SnT conferences are presented and discussed. Mr. Peter Hotchkiss is the Science Policy Advisor within the Office of Strategy and Policy at the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. There he serves as the Science Advisor to the Director General and acts as the Secretary to the organization's Scientific Advisory Board. In these roles, he helps the OPCW monitor scientific and technological developments and the impact they may have on the Chemical Weapons Convention and the work of the organization. Mr. Oleg Roshkov is also one of our distinguished panelists. He has been director of the CTBTO's On-Site Inspection Division since 2010. He holds a diploma in international relations from the Moscow State Institute for Foreign Relations. He is a former career diplomat for the Russian Federation Foreign Service and has held a number of diplomatic assignments, including that of Minister Counselor, Deputy Director of the Department for Disarmament and Security Affairs. He has been a member and deputy head of delegations to the review conferences of the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. And he also has been a senior counselor for nuclear non-proliferation within the Department of Disarmament and Security Affairs of the Foreign Ministry. He was also first secretary to the permanent mission of the Russian Federation in Vienna, among other positions. I welcome our panelists and thank you very much for being here with us today. This panel will follow the structure of the previous panels held during this conference. We will start with a first round of questions for our panelists. The panelists will have 5 minutes each for responding to this first round of questions. Then I will open the floor for questions from the audience. Online participants are also welcome to send us their questions, which I hope that I will receive in a timely manner, and of course we will be happy to address, time permitting, any questions that you may have. So let's start our discussion by recapping the main goals and mechanisms of CTBT verification. So my first question is for Michelle. So Michelle, we would like to hear from you what is understood as verification and compliance under the CTBT. What do you think are the unique features and advantages of the IMS as an effective multilateral verification tool? It would also be good to hear from you what are the mechanisms that are in place currently in the framework of the CTBTO to monitor technological advances, of course, in addition to the SnT conferences. So you have the floor, Michelle.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction, and good afternoon to everyone. So, of course, if we start with verification, verification is the process of just gathering and analyzing information to make a judgment about compliance or non-compliance. Now, a reliable and impartial verification regime or system that can be shown to be effective is an encouragement for countries to both join and support. Thus, it is vital that this verification remains up to date with the advances in science and technology in order to remain effective and to instill confidence from its member states. Now, I'll just recap a little bit. As we are aware, the CTBT verification regime consists of the three components. You have the International Monitoring System, which is a network of stations throughout the world that constantly monitors the ground, the oceans, and the air. Then we have the International Data Center that receives and processes that data from the stations and shares the information with the member states. And then, of course, the third component is the on-site inspections that collects evidence on the ground should data from the IMS indicate that a nuclear test may have taken place, thus the non-compliance. Now, this in itself is quite a unique regime that does not rely on national technical means for verification and is thus non-discriminatory and impartial, again making it an incentive for countries to join and support. Now, from this impressive network of stations comes, as you can imagine, a vast data bank of data that the CTBTO has used quite effectively to build confidence within its member states and to be used for the common good, which of course is what these treaties are about. They do this by providing data from the IMS stations to be used for civil and scientific endeavors. Now, this effort goes a long way in promoting the treaty, and its many uses have become essential and probably one could say in some areas indispensable, and what we've heard this week in aspects such as tsunami warnings, nuclear emergency responses, volcanic ash warnings for civil aviation, and more specific scientific research. And again, in this way, the CTBTO remains relevant to its member states and provides both a primary and a secondary benefit to the treaty. This is, of course, why we have the SnT conference series, in order to discuss the various uses and the research using the CTBTO data. In addition, advances in technology and engagements with experts and manufacturers within the various fields is also promoted. Now, these constant interactions are of mutual benefit to the scientific community, industry, and the CTBTO, and it allows the CTBTO to remain up to date with technology and, again, relevant to its members. Now, as I mentioned on Tuesday in the other panel, the scientific community is basically your professional societies, and they can assist the CTBTO in maintaining the technical and scientific excellence required for operating a verification regime of this standard, as well as providing guidance on the standards that are out there that have been developed by the scientific community. And these standards can ensure data integrity, which is essential for an impartial verification system. The IMS data, of course, as I said, is available to the member states for civil and scientific research, which is good for confidence building. But what is quite unique is that CTBTO also provides opportunities to the broader scientific community to use the data through the VDEC platform. Now, this is quite important in that it allows the CTBTO to widen its opportunity of identifying any out-of-the-box kind of thinking that could be applicable to their activities and could be applied to their system. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very, very much, Michelle, for sharing your thoughts on that. And it is particularly encouraging to hear your practical experience with the system and how you see that the way that the information is shared within the scientific community and among the members provides an important tool for confidence building and, of course, also promotes the support in the system. Continuing now with the CTBT framework, my next question is for Oleg. So once the CTBT enters into force, on-site inspections will be the ultimate verification measure under the treaty. As such, it is hoped that such a measure would never have to be implemented in practice, but to serve as an effective deterrent, there should be readiness to do so if necessary. So could you give us some remarks on the purpose of on-site inspections and how the organization keeps abreast of technological developments that may be relevant for effectively conducting an OSI, and how these developments are reflected into OSI procedures? Thank you.
Thank you, Fanny. Well, good afternoon, everybody. So, just to address your question, I would like, first of all, to put OSI element in the context of CTBT verification regime as it provided for by the treaty. Michelle already mentioned technical elements of the CTBT verification regime, that is IMS together with IDC and on-site inspections, but there are also two non-technical elements such as mechanism for consultations and clarifications and voluntary confidence building measures regarding large chemical explosions. So back to technical elements, they are mutually complementary. And as Michelle already mentioned, IMS together with IDC, it's more about verification of compliance on global scale at 24/7 mode. As for the OSI, it's more about the investigation of non-compliance in a very focused area, which should not exceed, according to the treaty, 1,000 square meters, in a very limited time frame, which should not exceed maximum 130 days, with very limited team, no more than 40 inspectors at once at the inspected state party. And the sole purpose of on-site inspection, as it provided by Article 4, paragraph 36, the sole purpose of the on-site inspection to clarify whether a nuclear weapon test explosion or any other nuclear explosion has been conducted in violation of Article 1 of the treaty, and to extent possible to gather facts which would assist to identify a possible violator. So, as you mentioned, on-site inspections could be applied and could be conducted only after entry into force. It's also written in the treaty, and developers of the treaty envisage that would be really ultimate and final verification measures, which is not to be used very frequently, maybe on exclusive, I would say, basis. And on-site inspection is to be conducted only upon the decision of the Executive Council. So the treaty also prescribes and provides for the specific list of the activities which could be done during on-site inspections and techniques which could be used. Everything is specified in the treaty. So besides that, besides techniques and activities, it's also important that during on-site inspection team follows the specific procedures. And that requires a lot of experience and training. Unlike other treaties which have verification regimes, CTBT doesn't provide for the permanent inspectorate. We have inspectors, we are supposed to have inspectors in future on call-on basis. So it's a big challenge for training, and it requires a lot of efforts even at present to understand what kind of training is needed, how it is needed to be conducted, and moreover, after entering into force, that would require a lot of efforts in that area. Back to the techniques. As I mentioned, it's all prescribed in the treaty, all the techniques. It's also prescribed in the treaty how they are to be applied, from less intrusive techniques gradually through initial period to continuation period and extension period to more intrusive, less intrusive techniques, that is such kind of position finding, visual observation with video and photo cameras, and the more intrusive, that is some geophysical techniques, especially deep geophysical techniques, and very much intrusive technique, which is applied only upon decision of executive secretary, that is possible, not possible, simply drilling in a suspected cavity of the nuclear, underground nuclear explosion. When the treaty was developed and agreed, those techniques which are supposed to be used during on-site inspection were at various stage or level even of development. Some of them were ready for application, but with time elapsed, we see that even these technologies evolve. I mean, for example, for visual observation, it was supposed to use still cameras. At that time, developers were thinking that their inspectors will use film cameras. Now, film cameras could be found only at the antique shops. We are using digital media. Some techniques were ready, but they were needed to be adapted for the specific purpose of on-site inspection. I mean, for example, passive seismic monitoring. Other techniques were requiring substantial development, for example, such thing as field laboratory for analysis of particulate and noble gas sample and environmental sampling. Other techniques were simply on the paper, and we needed to develop them and their application from the scratch. I mean, for example, resonance seismometry. So, how we develop these techniques, those especially which requires a lot of efforts and development. First of all, we need to understand what observables these techniques are focused, develop concept of operation, acquire some equipment and develop procedures, test them, and then finally validate them during various field exercises and other exercises such as, for example, integrated field exercises. So science and technology plays a great role in development of OSI techniques, and as I mentioned, they are clearly defined in the treaty, but respective methodology and procedures evolve, and they should reflect advances and achievements in various fields of science. So even at this science and technology conference, we saw a lot of things in the area of technologies which are relevant to OSI, that is, relates to the data processing, big data handling, some methods which could alternate conceptual aspects of how to conduct on-site inspection, and even training. We also are using not latest, but over decades developed, and which were not readily available. For example, like flight simulation. You also the helicopter on the ground floor. This is also advances of the, and achievements of technology which is used for training purposes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Oleg, for sharing the specificities of the on-site inspection regime and the inspection techniques and how they have been developed throughout the years, and also the particular need of a lot of training exercises and capacity building in that context, as there is no standing inspectorate for inspections in the framework of the CTBT. Now we move to another area. So we leave the CTBT framework, and we will hear from the other regimes. So my next question is for Mayra. Mayra, during the last year, we have had review conferences from various treaties, including the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, the Chemical Weapons Convention, and the Biological Weapons Convention. So my questions to you focus on the Biological Weapons Convention. As we know, this was the first treaty to entirely ban an entire category of weapons of mass destruction. But the convention lacks a verification regime. So we would like to hear from you, how is compliance assessed by states parties in that context? How do states parties exchange information on matters related to the convention in the absence of a verification regime? And it would be interesting to hear as well if there are mechanisms in place for monitoring scientific advances relevant for the implementation of the convention. And if you could also say a few words about the outlook after the recent 9th Review Conference. You have the floor. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Fanny, for those very interesting questions. I'd like to start by saying thank you to UNODA and the CTBTO for inviting me today to be part of this joint panel. For me, it's such an honor to be sitting next to all of these bright minds. So it's such a pleasure. I think it's very good and important first to, bring the focus again that this is a science and technology conference. So today we will have in the audience different backgrounds, but mostly we will have scientists, and we will have as well, policymakers. We will have diplomats from permanent missions. We will have representatives from international organizations. But mostly what we have is, people having this knowledge of all of you of the nuclear field. And a nuclear, background. So I suppose it was very good to start before addressing the questions as Fanny mentioned, to just set the base of what the BWC is, just to give a pretty brief introduction on the BWC, what does the BWC do. So we all know a little bit about the BWC. I think it's very important for all of us today in this panel, and our objective is that you leave today this room, that you leave this conference with a more, comprehensive view of other, multilateral disarmament treaties. So this is the idea of this panel. So while the BWC, the Biological Weapons and Toxins Convention, is really a centerpiece for me, it's fundamental in all of these multilateral disarmament treaties and regimes. Why? Well, because it's what Fanny mentioned. It really is a convention that bans an entire category of weapons of mass destruction. And this is the first treaty that ever, banned an entire category of weapons of mass destruction. So this is very important. And why? Well, because it prohibits, the use, it prohibits the production, the development, the acquisition, the transfer, and the stockpiling of biological and toxin weapons. So it's very comprehensive what the BWC does. So even if there are lots of advances in science and technology, and of course there are lots of risks, and we are interested in addressing those, the BWC is something that is really very comprehensive. So the BWC is a document that you can find online. It's very short. It actually has 15 articles. And they had review conferences every 5 years where state parties meet. And what they do in these review conferences is that they try to find points of understanding and agreement to, strengthening the convention and to see how they will implement the convention. So these review conferences, even that happen through every 5 years, you will see that there's, of course, in the middle, there are annual meetings that the BWC has to, again, keep discussing about these issues. So it's a very old regime. It entered into force in 1975. So you will say, well, we are very close to, having this 50 years since the BWC entered into force. And that will say, well, probably many of you will think, well, it's one of the conventions that we have a lot of things in place, and it's, well, no, there are some things that still are lacking, and something very important and more, in the context of this conference, the BWC lacks of a verification regime. It still lacks of that, and of course, for example, it doesn't have an international organization to support the implementation of the convention, as for example, the OPCW has with the Chemicals Weapons Convention. So there are still a lot of things that we want to, address, and that we look forward to see how the BWC will be evolving. As Fanny mentioned, this thing about not being a verification mechanism is something that we hope to see in the future. So if there's not a verification mechanism, I will, pass through the first question on how, state parties will address compliance if there's not a verification mechanism. So state parties address in one of the first, review conferences that they have, that they will be okay with sharing confident bidding measures, or CBMs. Confident bidding measures are a way that state parties have to really show their commitment with the BWC and the work done with the BWC. They are not mandatory, but we have seen through the years. So at the beginning, there was not a lot of states that were sharing these confident bidding measures. But through the years, we have seen, if you see the curve, it's really going up and it's increasing. So more states are sharing their confident bidding measures every year. So I think this is something that is as well, very interesting to see. And it shows the commitment to the BWC. And some of the points that, for example, a state party would be needing to, put in these confident building measures are, for example, if they had research facility centers, if they had high containment laboratories, what is the size of those high containment laboratories, what they are doing over there, if they had a biodefense program, and so on. So all of these important data to the BWC is what the, state parties will share with these confident building measures. So I think this is a very important point, and there is even if there's not verification mechanisms, there is a way that they can still share data and information about what they are doing, and to strengthening the convention. Regards the other question about if there is a specific mechanism to monitor advances in science and technology, well, actually, this is something that the BWC states as something that they are always, interested in, and it's part of a task that the BWC set. But again, they never really carry out these in a very systematic way. So there's still nothing concrete on science and technology, as, for example, the OPCW has a scientific advisory group. So still we are missing that point of having something very specific to address advances in science and technology. But of course, there have been, through all of these years, meetings of experts, meetings of state parties, informal meetings, consultation meetings, and through all of these meetings, they address, all the challenges and all the changes that we see regards to, science and technology, but as well about security, about politics. So one of the important points is it's not specific, but we will have some, places where a state party can meet and discuss science and technology. And well, about the outcomes of the 9th Review Conference. So The first review conference was in 1980, and now we are having the ninth review conference that we had. It was in November, December last year. So one important point of that is that there were some outcomes. I would say that the agreement that we find, it was kind of a middle-term agreement. We wish to see, to see more of an agreement and more specific points that they will be going to be, doing with the BWC. But again, seeing how it was the landscape with other treaties, and some treaties didn't, in the nuclear field as well, you didn't just find consensus and an agreement at the end. So at least having a middle-term agreement was good for the BWC. So some of the things and points that they address is to have a fourth person for the implementation support unit. The implementation support unit, for all of you to know, is it's a unit that supports the implementation, of course, of the BWC, but it actually really basically provides support for state parties. They organize meetings. It's more like an administrative support for the BWC. But imagine it's 3 people. So this is something that we want to see in the future to address. They are changing now to 4, so that's good. At least we have another new person, but it's something that we want to see. And this, of course, shows the lack of resources that the BWC has in comparison to, in the nuclear field or comparison with the chemical field. So I think that's also something that why we are not seeing much progress, nowadays. So. Something very important is that they decided that they continue to keep discussing about to find mechanisms in science and technology. So the language is very important in this type of final documents. So if it's very difficult for state parties many times to find an agreement. So if they agree that they will keep looking for this scientific advisory group or a way to find how to have this scientific mechanism, I think that's very important. So it's good that they keep that on the table. Another part that was kind of a negative aspect is that due to some of the ongoing discussions through the review conference regards to the war in Ukraine and Russia, there were a lot of allegations in the room, so it was very difficult. They really had a lot of time occupied with that, and there was no time at the end to go to do a review of article per article, which is something that always is very important because we review article by article in detail. So that was something that was missing. And then, well, I think that's the last thing that they agree is that they will have a new working group that will address cooperation as an assistance. It will also address science and technology, so that's a point where we at least are seeing some new changes. And we hope that they actually address this in the future to have this scientific advisory group or some sort of way of mechanism to address advances in science and technology. And as well, they also put in the agenda, in the official agenda, to have the meetings from this working group to also address verifications and compliance. So it's good that it's now again coming back the word verification, and maybe in the future we are seeing some of these changes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mayra, for sharing the BWC experience. I think it is good to hear that even within the limitations of that convention, state parties are still moving forward and trying to address matters of verification and also ways to leverage advances in science and technology. And on that note, let us now hear from a regime that has long been established and an organization that has many years of experience in implementing that verification regime, the OPCW. So my next question is for Peter. And we would like to hear from you some remarks on the main elements of the OPCW's verification regime and how does the organization monitor advancements in science and technology. It would also be useful for the discussion to hear from you, to hear your views about the main opportunities and challenges that may arise from such advancements for the organization's verification work. You have the floor. Thank you.
Thanks, Fanny. And thank you to the organizers for having me here today and my fellow panelists. I'll stick to my notes because otherwise I'll pontificate for hours. The Chemical Weapons Convention prohibits the development, production, acquisition, retention, stockpiling, transfer and use of chemical weapons. The verification annex, the most extensive portion of the convention, provides a comprehensive regime for verifying all chemical weapons-related activities, as well as routine monitoring of the chemical industry through on-site inspections. This supports both disarmament and non-proliferation, as well as the increasing focus by the OPCW on preventing reemergence of chemical weapons. All states parties are required to make detailed declarations providing information on chemical weapons and associated facilities. Similarly, all states parties are required to make chemical industry declarations related to toxic chemicals and precursors that are mentioned in the 3 schedules of chemicals in the annex on chemicals to the convention. There are 241 planned inspections each year. So confidence is built through the review, compilation, and evaluation of declared data by states parties, and through the inspection of declared sites related to chemical weapons, as well as within the chemical industry. So it's quite a robust verification regime. And it's also very much a trust but verify approach. So, as has been stated before, and what's likely already evident among all of you, is that all of this is underpinned by science. The negotiators of the Chemical Weapons Convention did a very smart thing when they included a provision for the Director General to have a scientific advisory board to assist in monitoring advances in science technology of relevance to the convention, as well as provide advice and recommendations related to those advances. So while we do have a convention that's now just over 25 years old, we also have a robust means by which to ensure that the fantastic advances that we all see take place can be properly understood, to ensure the risks they pose can be considered and the opportunities they present can be utilized. The OPCW Scientific Advisory Board is comprised of 25 esteemed scientists and experts from OPCW member states. All 5 regional groups are represented, and the Director General strives for gender parity on the board. And so the SAB, which is what we call it, monitors all types of advances in science technology with a focus on emerging, converging, and disruptive science and technology. And as we know, science is increasingly transdisciplinary. The board ensures that it takes a broad brush approach to capture all the developments of relevance. And so I'll just give one quick example that should come as no surprise. Like everyone else in the world, artificial intelligence, or AI, has certainly caught the attention of the OPCW. The SAB has looked at this in depth over the last few years, and I can say the following things. You know, when it comes to risks and opportunities that exist from this highly disruptive, cutting-edge technology with really an unparalleled flexibility of application. The most concerning is that AI's data prediction capability could be misused to design new toxic chemicals, or even identify novel pathways to the synthesis of known chemical warfare agents, and essentially bypassing the verification regime. This is something that we're really taking a look at. Others include the maturation of automated synthesis, using more robotics in the laboratory. That makes things easier for potential nefarious actors to produce chemicals. And of course, the rapid and indiscriminate spreading of misinformation and disinformation, which could undermine the convention and the work that we do. However, in the same breath, I should note the exciting opportunities that this technology presents to us. We may be able to increase chemical safety and security by utilizing AI, or enhance our capabilities for non-routine missions, or conversely even strengthen the verification regime. AI could help us fill critical knowledge gaps in data that we have related to toxic chemicals. And it could help accelerate the design and discovery of medical countermeasures for exposure to chemical weapons agents. So in closing, the OPCW is fortunate to have a scientific review mechanism as part of the convention, and it's proven time and time again to be critical in the proper implementation of the convention and the work of the organization. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Peter, for sharing with us the example of the OPCW and the advantages of having an institutionalized scientific review mechanism in that context to support the verification work. It caught my attention that the scientific board looks at emerging, converging, and disrupting technologies. And I think the example you provided about artificial intelligence also highlights this dual use dilemma that we find across the various regimes, and that it is, of course, important to address both the benefits and the risks. So thank you very much. So I thank all the panelists for these interesting contributions. I think all of these contributions have highlighted the importance, the mechanisms, and the challenges of leveraging technological advances for effective multilateral verification. And I would now like to open the floor for questions from the audience. Are there any questions at this stage? So if you have any questions, please raise your hand. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. I commend the panelists. I have perhaps comment and question with it in it. First of all, the OSI by nature is some sort of inspection based on allegation of country X against country Y, and when the whole system of IMS and IDC are not able to give reliable information so that such a test has happened, then there is allegation. It means that we open a new chapter of polarization, politicization of this organization. You will not see after the entire force and sort of OSI, triggering OSI, such a beautiful, excellent environment of cooperation. Therefore, the scientific conference, which I admire the CTBT for this excellent work, should call our scientists to work more intensively so that there is no need for such a OSI to be created or to use the country X and Y because of political reasons or any reasons. That would be sufficient, reliable information that there is no need for SI in the future. Therefore, I think this kind of event and all collaboration of the scientists is very crucial for the future of CTBT. As for the BWC, since I was in charge at that time in the BWC also, this is a very pity because in 2002, after years of negotiation, the rolling text was just finalized. I was in Geneva, and it was supposed that in Geneva there would be an organization for the verification of biological weapon convention, but all of a sudden, Mr. Bolton came from US and said, no, we will not join it, and everything went to dormant, and it is over 20 years in archive. We don't have any verification for biological weapon. Perhaps if we had such an organization during this humanitarian disaster of COVID, at least we can have more reliable technical scientific information for public of the world. That is, I think, lessons to learn. For the CWC and the OPCW, which I also was in charge, I commend the OPCW, not only because of the CWC, which has envisaged challenge inspection. It means that everybody was accusing the country, there's accountability. That is why we don't have these political problems there. But of course, there are intensive, intrusive works there on inspections. The only thing is recently we've had a mistake to authorize the inspection to go beyond of their mandate as envisaged in the spiritual letter of CWC. And this is a very somehow worrisome. They have to reconsider establishing of inspection, giving the mandate of the member states to the Secretariat. I have a lot to say, I'm sorry. These are food for thought that we have to learn lessons among these three organizations, and of course CTBT could learn a lot. I congratulate everybody for this forum. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir, for your comments and for your kind words for the organizers of the event and of this panel. I will give the floor to the panelists in case they want to respond. And of course, I will kindly ask the panelists to of course, focus on the objective of the panel, which is the relevance of science and technology for verification. So if there is any comment that you wish to make in connection with this intervention. Any of the panelists at this stage? No. So thank you again. Is there any other question from the audience? Yes, sir, please go ahead.
Thank you to. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Oh. And, thank you very much for this exciting discussion. I would like. We knew from media that UK sent ammunitions with some, I think, cobalt-60 to Ukraine. My question is if this is classified as a chemical weapon and it is under your control, and in this case, if so, how do you supervise or make control on this kind of devices?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch. Chemical munitions with what in them?
Yes, during the Ukrainian war, I knew from the news that UK sent ammunitions, including is conventional ammunition with cobalt-60, and this is called dirty bombs. I don't know if it is true, but if it is under your control or not.
I haven't heard anything about that, and that would not be under our control, no.
Oh.
Thank you, Peter. Are there other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Anastasia Kulikova, National Research Nuclear University, MEFI. A huge thanks to all the panelists, but my question is addressed to Mr. Roshkov about the OSI inspections and about the legal kind of loopholes. So my question is about the perspectives of the OSI technology verification regime. So is there any possibilities maybe to create an additional protocol to the CTBT for the introducing OSI before entry into force of the treaty? Thank you so much.
Thank you for your question. Oleg?
I'm not quite sure that I understood the question. The question is to have some additional legal document which is pushing
yes, for
the entry into force. But in any case, not mentioning political and other considerations about the current situation with the current text of the treaty, any additional protocol to the treaty which would be could be integral part of the treaty, would require a renewed cycle of ratifications. So, because those countries who have ratified the treaty, they have not ratified that imaginary or possible additional protocol. They would need to go to renewed cycle of the legislative process to ratify the treaty. And frankly, this is my personal opinion, that I'm not sure in that renewed cycle of ratification we would have the same number of ratifiers as we have now.
Thank you. Thank you, Oleg. Yes, please, sir.
Hi, I'm Dave Sanderson from Sandia Labs in the United States, and I have a question for each of you. Given this conference and the recent review conferences, do each of you have a technology that 5 years from now you would like to look back and say, the science and technology community helped me with that problem? Pick a favorite if you have one, but it's nice to hear things that are of interest to you. Thank you.
So thank you. Which of the panelists wishes to make a first comment?
So I will just add a brief note on that. Well, there are a lot of emerging technologies right now, and in the field of biological scientists, we will see synthetic biology, genetic engineer. There are a lot of things, but I think coming back to what Peter was mentioning about the scientific advisory group from the OPCW addressing artificial intelligence, what I think that would be very interesting in the future, because again, it poses a lot of risk, and I think we are all seeing people asking questions, how can I, do anything, and they're really providing, answers to that. But I think at the end, still it's very difficult to, for ChatGPT and all the things that we have with AI, to still address something and create or develop at least, a biological weapon, a chemical weapon. You still need the knowledge, you still need a lot of things. But I think that we can also use this in the future to enhance biosecurity in laboratories, to enhance, different measures, control measures in laboratories as well, and high containment units. So I think we can also use this, to enhance biosecurity and again to strengthen the whole implementation of the biological weapons, at least, in my field.
May I?
Yes, please. Oleg.
Maybe not directly related to the previous SNTs conducted here in Vienna, but definitely related to the recent developments and demonstrated at various scientific and technological forums. We are now seriously exploring possibilities of use of various types of robotics for the purpose of on-site inspections. I mean, first of all, unmanned platforms, ground-based and low-altitude area-based platforms, especially for the purposes of inspecting and making measurements and other observations in the areas which are hazardous, and especially hazardous to the health and safety of potential inspectors. And you saw on the ground, and you will see maybe soon also, this nice Boston Robotics dog, but this is not about this nice dog which could dance, lie, and even buck, but about the equipment it can bear. And this equipment is very important and substantial for the conduct of on-site inspections. For example, making 3D imagery of the closed rooms or tunnels where maybe some radioactivity at high levels, that could be very important, but this is still a big work ahead of us together with state signatories, how and with what procedures to apply these achievements. Thank you.
Thank you, Oleg. We are coming to the end of our panel. We can take one more question, if there is one. I see no further questions. So, yes, I see one. Yes. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much to the panelists. It's Simon from Botswana. My question is directed to Oli. That what are the challenges or advantages and disadvantages of confidence building measures? Thank you.
Well, I think that's a very good question. I think that is something that is not mandatory. Like what we want to see and the challenges we want to see in the future is that state parties really start to meet in more and more confidence building measures. So I think that would be the challenge, that we keep that, as I was saying, if it was a graphic, we're seeing that the number of state parties are every year submitting more confident building measures. So I think that if we could achieve to, all of them really provide their information, their data, they share that information, what we're going to be doing is, reducing and preventing these ambiguities, also, preventing these misunderstandings, doubts, and what we are doing is increasing transparency. So I think that's something that what we want is to keep having those numbers up through, the years and the future, so state parties share their data. So yeah, I would say that.
Thank you. Well, with that, we conclude our panel. I thank again the panelists and the audience for participating in this interesting conversation. We don't have much time for a comprehensive summary, but I would just like to mention 2 key takeaway points. First of all, that while the treaties and verification mechanisms underpinning the various regimes are very distinct, it's obvious that science and technology developments remain a common denominator for achieving advances in multilateral verification and for maintaining confidence in the system. My other key message is that I believe that the conversation has shown that there is a lot of opportunity for lessons learned across the various regimes, and I hope that there will be further opportunities in the future for exchanging on this topic. Do the panelists wish to add anything? No? So thank you very much again, and with that we conclude our panel. Thank you.